Thank you all for joining us for the Q&A for the Việt Kiều, Vietnamese American Shorts program. My name is Michelle Pham, and I'm the moderator for this discussion. And just a brief background about me. I'm Vietnamese American, born in Houston, was raised there, but I live in Seattle now. I'm a lawyer here, and I am a big supporter of SAAFF, and I have been for the last couple of years. And it's a big family here, and so it's really nice to be able to have the opportunity to welcome you into the fam and to learn more about you and your films. So on behalf of SAAFF, the Seattle Asian American Film Festival, I would like to welcome Anthony Nguyen from Farming Slowly, Melanie Ho from Sống, and Quyên Nguyen-Le, the morning passing El Cajon Boulevard. And I hope I said that all correctly. Thank you so much for sharing your films and joining us for this conversation. This is probably the best time for you to give us a little introduction about yourselves and where you're joining us from. And I guess we can start with Anthony.
I'm calling in from LA. I live in LA and do film in Los Angeles now. But I've been doing film for like probably about 11 years now. I started when I was 16 and just started making shorts with my friends and my family back in high school. And then ever since after graduating high school, I just moved to LA and started working and trying to do film stuff.
How about you next, Melanie?
Yeah, hi. My name is Melanie Ho. Thanks for inviting me into this space and with these really amazing filmmakers. I'm calling in from Jacksonville, Florida, which is where I was born and raised and where my family is from. And I recently graduated from UCSC's Social Documentation MFA program. And that's the film that's being shown is my thesis. So I'm excited to be here with y'all.
I guess that leaves me. Hi, everyone. My name is Nguyen-Le. I am currently calling in from Garden Grove, California, Little Saigon here in Southern California. And my film, it takes place in San Diego, in City Heights, which was where I used to live before I moved here to Garden Grove. So I'm really excited to share that project. It was a part of the San Diego Asian Film Festival's 20th year anniversary celebrating Asian American voices in San Diego. And I'm really excited virtually to return to Seattle Asian Film Festival, which has been a source of inspiration for me for a long time. So I'm glad I can be here despite not being here.
Yeah, so I know your film took place, I actually was kind of curious myself on where each of your films took place and whether you had to travel and kind of the timeline for you with respect to COVID and how you dealt with that.
Yeah, so my film was shot before COVID in the summer of 2019. So I was lucky to catch on that before COVID, and I went up to Portland, Oregon, where my cousins, the person in the video is my cousin. She has a farm up in Portland and grows it herself. So I was able to go up there, spend about a week with her, and film it.
Oh, sorry, Melanie. Okay, it's so hard on Zoom to kind of get the body gestures. So yeah, as I mentioned, my film takes place in City Heights, San Diego, which was and is still known as a refugee hub in the city of San Diego. That's where a lot of Vietnamese refugees, Southeast Asian refugees, and now other groups of refugees were being resettled back in the aftermath of the Vietnam War. And I, at the time, was living there. I also shot in 2019. So that was right before everything sort of changed for us, I guess, in the filmmaking world. So I was able to be there in person And being so close, living so close to the mortuary where Julie, who is in my film, works at, made it possible to do the kind of work that is done in the film that was very much unplanned. And if I was living in LA or something, which my DP did, it would have been very, very difficult to get some of the more urgent moments. So yes, to Melanie.
Yeah, I was gonna say that like our films are quite location based. I'm like even imagining like the carrots from the farm in Oregon. But yeah, I was filming in New Orleans. I did a like very long road trip with my sister from California to New Orleans for the summer and filmed before COVID as well in 2019 and had the year after to edit. And I finished my editing in COVID, but post-production I feel like is a lot easier rather than like going out and filming during these times. So I think I got really lucky.
That's great. I'm probably gonna ask some more specific questions to each of you and then kind of jump back to general ones. But Anthony, with your film, I found it was it had a different note than some of the other films in the short films list in this program. You know, it to me was a focus on a different type of lifestyle, and it wasn't just about being Vietnamese American, for example. So I'd love to hear what you've thought about, you know, why your cousin and why this particular lifestyle that you wanted to highlight.
Yeah, yeah. So I got the chance to look at some of the other films, and there's a lot about like family, and I feel like a lot of like Việt Kiều and like people around my age, like 20 somethings, like to do films about their family, and you know, to kind of understand understand their past and their family, and I really like hearing those stories and doing those myself too. Just this specific one was about my cousin and kind of like my generation of being Asian American and growing up in America. So the film is basically her having her own farm and growing crops herself, and basically it's just her on the land. And so it's about how growing up in America, it's more about like production oriented and trying to make things happen, always on the hustle. And this film, she takes like almost like a step back and kind of really enjoys the land that she lives on. Really takes care of her farm. Takes the time to like work on her mental health. Work on the farm. It's more about like quality over quantity of the crops. And I think just that lifestyle is very different as far as being an American. And I feel like with Melanie's film, it's very like still life and very like meditative. And I think that combination, it's like we have. I feel like a lot of Asian people have that sensibility, like taking a step back, being reflective, and being put into an American lifestyle. It's kind of that dichotomy, and how do you kind of balance production and also balance being more reflective, more like kind of observing.
I love that. I also really appreciated her comment at the very end where she's like, you know, get to know your farmer and get to know how much they care about their land, their produce, and the work that they put into it. And it very much shows throughout your film.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Melanie, for Salmon, kind of like what Anthony mentioned, that still life kind of angle and way of capturing the scenes. What made you choose to use that type of style in this film?
Yeah, I think Shanghai has a lot of time spent with scenes and peoples and even shots. And I think that comes from myself as a person. Like I'm an observing person, and I think I live my life a lot through observations of observing people, relationships, like histories. And so I was trying to find a way to like show myself through the film as well, because I have such a huge relationship with like the filmmaking process, as I'm sure like a lot of filmmakers do. But yeah, I think it comes from me wanting to spend some time on place, and I think, as Anthony was saying, like be really meditative about it and have a place where folks can reflect as viewers as well.
I noticed in your film, it seemed to me that you were following different people or different groups of people. Was there, why did you choose those particular people to highlight?
I originally went to New Orleans wanting to look at foodways. So like different ways that food gets expressed, from the farming, from like the harvesting of shrimp, to like it being turned into food. But I didn't quite get to the part where it got turned into food, just like the production side of it. And it was basically like who I could get into contact with at that time. So I went to like a lot of Vietnamese stores, restaurants. I hit up a bunch of people who I didn't know and was like, hey, do you know someone who I could follow? Do you know anyone that would be like willing to let me spend some time with them? And shrimping is a huge part of New Orleans. So I think that was like really important to me. And I would go past one of the churches, one of the Vietnamese churches there, and they had this garden right in front of it. And I got in contact with the folks that run the garden. And so it was just like who was willing to talk to me and who was willing to let me spend some time with them.
Gotcha. Quinn, so I thought your film had a very different vibe. Like, I feel like your main character was very outgoing and opinionated and outspoken. Tell us about, this particular person, and why did you focus on funeral services in the San Diego area?
Yeah, so I definitely met, so Julie, who is the main person in the film, is the funeral director. She's a general manager, actually, of several funeral homes in San Diego. But I focused on the one that was in my neighborhood because it was sort of like one of the first ones that she managed. And I think I built the film around her. So it was actually supposed to be about her before anything else because of her outgoing personality. I think that I met her just through living in the area and being like a participant of several kind of things that were happening. And when I met her, I remember thinking, wow, this person has like a personality that is like great for film because she's so outgoing and also very open in a way that I think a lot of other Vietnamese people aren't. And I am generalizing, but I think that there is a lot of trauma around being overrepresented. I think a lot of people, as maybe Melanie and Anthony have experienced, if they've ever like gone into a community as Melanie has and asked people to be in a film, people are always like, what was it for? Where are you showing it? Like, I don't know. I don't want to represent myself badly. And I think a lot of that comes from, the history of like maybe even like re-education camps, like people don't want to be deported. But Julie was kind of always very open. And I thought that it was funny that she worked in such an industry where people, expect her to be like really serious. And she takes her job really seriously. But it's like a funny kind of juxtaposition, I guess, of like being outgoing and also working in funeral services, which is like makes sense, right? But then also surprises people. And her mentor, Do Nguyen, came on because of Julie. So I feel very much that this film was like based around her and the work she was doing. And to be honest, very unrecognized work that I never underestimate how much people overlook women working in this space. And so it's something that, she goes through that she might not explicitly talk about, but I don't know. I saw her. And then when I was asked to do a film about Vietnamese Americans in San Diego, I knew exactly that it was going to be about that. Because there's a lot of other sorts of maybe more like broadcast media, like TV news kind of stuff around Vietnamese Americans in San Diego. And they do have to say, as Anthony was saying, around like resettlement. And I just wanted to talk about that thing, but in a different way. And I thought that funeral services was a good way to talk about how people made their lives in the United States without talking explicitly about the part where they just came, and then maybe like talk a little bit about after.
Yeah, I think you touched upon kind of like a overall question I have for all of you. You know, we talk about representation in the Vietnamese American community, and there's so many facets to being Vietnamese American. To me, I think, like, even when I sit down and ask my parents about their refugee story, I don't always get the full story, you know, until, oh, I'm sorry, until, you know, I have a third person there, or, you know, it's not recorded or something like that, you know, or we're sharing a meal and we're just talking about it. You know, what are your thoughts on, you know, I guess different ways that we can showcase our community, whether it's good or bad, or just the new. There's just so many ways we can approach it. And so I just kind of generally am curious about your thoughts.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a really load. That's a lot to like think about, right? Like representation. So I feel like representation is like the best way to do that is like just to tell the truth and to tell what daily life is. I think that's like the best way to represent like us and represent just people in general. It's just to like show daily life, because that's what generally people do, is just like how do they go about their day. And then as like Asian, like Vietnamese Americans, like it's not like all our conversations about the Vietnam War, like there's conversations about so many other things that we have together, right? And the Vietnam War only comes up like every once in a while, and like pretty rarely when you're talking to your parents. So I think just to show daily life and just to like see what people are up to, I think that's just the best way to represent somebody, because obviously our life is now different from our parents' lives, and how we interact with people in society and American culture. It's obviously very different, and I mean that's our story, the Viet Kiws. So yeah, that's how to represent, I think.
And I apologize, I know I asked like a super long loaded question, so, you know, we could skip it if you'd like to.
I'd like to try to take a stab at it. Yeah, I do think that it's a lot to think about. And I think it's something that can be continued to be thought about. I don't know if what like my rambling is going to answer the question at all. But for me, I think that like representation means that there's someone behind the camera that has like an authentic story, and someone who's like in front of the camera that has an authentic story. And like having space for both to exist together. And I do agree, like for myself, I knew that there were like growing up, I knew there was a lot of trauma that was haunting us. And like as a kid, I never wanted to dive into it. And when I grew up, I was like, oh, maybe I do want to talk to my parents about some of this trauma, but like now I don't have good enough Vietnamese to talk to them about it. And also they don't want to talk about it. Like they don't want me digging up their trauma. So for me, I think like the way that I try to find representation in them is to like express their body in certain ways. And like I think the way that I do filmmaking is that I look at people's bodies and see how they express kind of like their emotions or their feelings or even what's haunting them. And I think like when I see something that connects with my own family, I try to bring that out in other people as well. I don't know if that's like centering my family too much, but it's a way for me to find connection between like what I'm doing and what I'm filming to like other folks as well.
actually have a follow-up to that. I noticed in your film, there's a lot less dialogue and there's a lot more background sounds, whether it's from like, it sounds like a church service, and then music. Did what you just say kind of inform your I guess lack of use of dialogue and more in terms of other sounds?
Yeah, I think that ties directly with like the soundscape of the film, where I did ask like interview questions and it was all in Vietnamese and like it was coherent. But I think there is like so much more to be said about the surrounding sounds rather than the interviews themselves, that I wanted to kind of like focus more on kind of like what Anthony was saying, like the everyday like life experience. And the sound that's in the film, it's like they're wearing a radio that broadcasts like a Catholic church in Vietnam. And they listen to it while they're working like every single day, all up until like when the battery runs out. So I think like to express that in some kind of way within the film was really important because that's what I experienced and that's what they experience as well.
Quyên, did you want an opportunity to speak on the representation question, or I can move on?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. I think it's something that I think about all the time and we're always talking about, and as Melanie said, that we should continue to talk about. I mean, I think that I've always felt that the Vietnam War was overrepresented on film, and to what Melanie observed, those representations were not always about Vietnamese people. So, you know, like the 1980s giant wave of 100 films about the Vietnam War, you know, like winning Oscars and awards and everything. And so it's not that people don't think about the Vietnam War or Vietnam in general, but it's this idea that we're always speaking against that representation. Like we're always like, we're not just a war, we're not just this and that. And I think there is a kind of limit to always speaking back. And so I don't know, I think it maybe just like as a queer person, I think I both lean into my family, but away from them. A lot of people, when I was like growing up, I felt that my parents were my only, being born here, I felt that they were my only kind of gateway to my Vietnamese identity. And I felt that if I didn't match up with what they said was Vietnamese, then I wasn't, you know? And it's a very clear thing now as an older person to be like, oh, you can be Vietnamese outside of your family, because that's an identity that is not owned by, you know, your blood relations. And I think in a different way in this film that I made with Julie, she is like leaning into cultural practices, but she also has like a rebellious spirit at one point. And it's all alluded to, you know, like she talks about how she ran away from home before, kind of like this return, but on your own terms. And I think that so much reflects my own, I don't know, experience with being Vietnamese. Like I feel like super Vietnamese right now. I live in Little Saigon. It's like, you know, but at one point in my life I didn't. And I think that all has to do with like the representation of like who gets to tell the story, right? And so I don't know, in a way sometimes I get I feel boxed in, you know, like people are always expecting me to talk about Vietnamese people, which I always do in all my films, but then in different ways. Like we have, you know, tiny bits about this and that. And I don't know, now I'm just rambling, but I think that in leaning into what Anthony said, like the truth, and like kind of understanding sometimes where we do fall into tropes and sometimes we don't, but that being the experience of the individual people that you're talking about is sometimes more important than speaking against an image of who we are that was made before we were born, or maybe while we were born. I don't know. People are still obsessed with the Vietnam War. There's going to be like 2 more films about the Vietnam War in like the next 2 years.
Yeah, I think the 50th anniversary of the fall is going to come up and we're going to see another surge. I think what you just said really resonated with me because my parents were the refugee generation, right? And there is so much of the keep your culture, speak the language, be able to eat all of these things. Like, you know, my dad ate everything and I ate things like pican, right? I guess for those in the audience who don't know what that is, it's like congealed duck blood. Sounds gross, actually pretty good. Putting in a plug. And and I think there is this struggle, this individual struggle that we have, and we don't always talk about on an individual level, you know. How do we reconcile this push for keeping culture, but also forming our own identity as people who were either born or raised in America and trying to find that right mashup for us? And I think we all eventually find that. But it's nice to be able to see films like each of yours and see just a small number of ways that people have found that balance, right? And how different it can be. And I think in Selma Day, there's like, you see kind of the older generation and the younger. And so you see a little bit of that, you know, the one of the conversations that are out there, which is the loss of home, the loss of country. And I don't think it was ever answered in that, but it kind of brings up, you know, a dialogue, at least in my own mind, and I hope it brings more dialogue for others. But that was me rambling as well. Okay, let me get back to my questions here. So were there any aspects of production or post-production, pre-production even, that really stood out to each of you that you'd like to share with the audience?
I don't know if we have our order set. Like, is it Anthony, Melanie, me?
Oh, whoever. I hope this is just a conversation.
Yeah, I think for me, so I was more trained, I would say, in narrative fiction filmmaking. I make scripted films. And this was my first professional documentary, in the sense that I had made a documentary before as an undergraduate student, which I consider maybe, like, I like it, but I don't know. It never got really shown as much everywhere else. But documentary is such a test of endurance, I think, in the sense that you have to just kind of be present and be willing to move wherever people are moving, you know, and that's kind of like stressful on a technical level sometimes. And I felt very much that that's what happened in this film, is that I came into it with the idea that it's going to be a film about Julie and her mentor, both like women of different generations working in the funeral industry, and about like their relationship. But then I'm just gonna assume that everyone watched the film by this time, and I'm gonna give spoilers. But then what happens is that something personal happens to Julie. Her father passes away. Like, I'm literally on my second day of filming when that kind of happens. Like, all our pre-production, what we thought we were gonna do, it like all kind of ended, or not ended, it just like major swerve when she called me and she was like, I'm at the hospital. And I was very surprised because we didn't know each other that well. Like, we knew each other, like, you know, casually talking about a film and like her career, but I didn't feel that she would trust me and my camera person, Kayla. So we were a 2-person team to just like come to the hospital with her, and then to follow her throughout that very quick, like when someone passes, the funeral happens very quickly. And I think we just had to really think on our feet in terms of what we're gonna do, like how much is private and how much are we gonna film. Because for anyone who's ever lost a loved one and has been through like a funeral. It's long days. And I think that she was very generous to let us be there, and her family was very generous. And we were always kind of negotiating boundaries of like, should we and can we do this? And if not, okay, how do we do this? And I think that was like a crash course for me in documentary ethics of like, how do you do all this? Like, as someone who's like very used to scripted, making my shot lists and like having a schedule, like this was totally like out of schedule. And I think that's what's like both scary and fun about documentary.
So with farming slowly, like one of my side goals was to explain to our family, which is me and my cousin in the video. One of my goals was to explain to our family what she did in Portland, Oregon, like having a farm, because the thing was like our whole family is like, why is she going out to some random part of the USA to farm? Like, didn't we do that back in our homeland? And like, isn't that like a thing that we're trying to get away from? And like they wanted her to have an office job and a nice job to make a lot of money. And like making money is like the number one thing like your parents want you to do, like to support yourself, right? So I wanted to explain to our family what she did. And then once they saw the video, they understood things better, and they understood like that this was her farm. Like she wasn't really working for somebody, just like doing labor's work. Like she really cared about her farm, what she did, and she was able to make some money by selling her crops. So yeah, I think that was really interesting, and trying to like being able to show them what like these two kids did on the West Coast, because we're from Virginia. I think that was really interesting to show them and to have them understand what she did, and also on the side to understand what I did as a filmmaker.
Can I say that it's like really wild listening to what happened with your film, Quyên, that like he passed on day 2, because I think the pacing and the timing of the film feels so intentional, and it's like it doesn't show that hectic side of filming. So that's really amazing to hear. But yeah, I think for me during production myself, like going back on finding folks for the film, I was like running around trying to find a shrimper that I could go on their boat and film them shrimping, because the shrimping season was about to open. And I was like hectically finding someone. I almost had someone, but then they were like, "Oh, my boat is not working. You can't come." And one day I got a call during the season's open for the shrimping season, and one of the boaters was like, "Hey, we're going out today. Do you want to come?" So I dropped everything, and then I went with them on their boat, and I didn't know how long it would be. I've never been on a boat before. So like I think documentary filmmaking allows for like a lot of fun things to happen, and just allows for a lot of space for like a lot of creativity, I think, and opportunities where I think if it was something that I scheduled and I had to stay on a strict schedule, then something like that, like an opportunity like that, wouldn't come by. So I think I really like the spontaneity of documentary filmmaking.
You know, based on your experiences, what would you advise? I guess, do you have any advice for other filmmakers, I guess, in the Vietnamese American space or other?
Do they have advice for me? Is the real question.
It's collaborative, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the films that I make and the inspiration comes a lot from my family. So like I'll just journal or write things about like say like a whole family going out to a buffet, and like the conversations that happen during that buffet. I think those are really interesting. Or like if you're doing like a nam yo at home or something like that, I think those are such interesting like conversations being made and like people getting together. And so I'll write those things, just like free writing, and those will spark like interesting stories or directions that I want to go with a certain film, or just like scenes that I think would be really interesting. So a lot of times I'll definitely pull from like events in my family to write and to make films about.
I'll chime in with two things, jokes aside. One of the other films in the section is Carol Nguyen's No Crying at the Dinner Table. And I think what really stuck out to me in that film is the last part. Again, sorry, spoiler, where she plays back her interviews for her family. And I think that shows a practice that I think is great for any filmmaker, is that, or especially in documentary, right? It's like, if you make a film about people, do you consider how they themselves will react to how you represented them? And that's not to say that you always have to represent people in the way they want, because I think everyone has a certain kind of way that you want people to understand you. And sometimes that might not be in line with what filmmakers think of you. So there's always that kind of tension. So I think the more we are in tune with who our audience is, like who is going to see the film, who's this film speaking to, the more specific I think and truthful we can be about the films we make. So it's like, are we trying to explain ourselves to someone who doesn't know anything about us, or are we trying to explain ourselves to other people like us? And I think that's like something I'm always in tune with, or trying to be in tune with. And the second piece is a practical piece, I would say, which is, it's a long haul to be a filmmaker. As you're, I'm not that old, but I feel like I've just been like chugging along for a really long time, and who knows how much longer. Like it's not the 1990s, you hit Sundance and they give you a Marvel movie kind of way. So it's, if you can kind of plan in the long term, whether that's getting a day job or doing something that will feed you both literally and creatively, while you continue to develop, that is the best advice I can give. And if you don't make it in 5 years, it's not that long. If you really want to do it, it's going to take more than 5 years. But if 5 years feels like a long time, that's a whole college degree. And you're like, oh my God, I've been doing it for so long. Am I just not good enough if I didn't make it? I feel like that's like something everyone goes through. But if you can just find a way to like validate yourself and keep reminding yourself that you're good and you're great and you're doing fine. Yeah, it's not just a mental thing, it's like a structural thing. So for me, I like sharing films at festivals like this because it makes me feel motivated. But if I just made a film and then never showed it to anyone, it would feel not as, I don't know, like an achievement. So, build in self congratulatory parts, I think, is a great part of being an artist.
I think a word of advice, I don't know if this is advice, but maybe being vulnerable, like being open to being vulnerable, both to like whoever you're in communication with, your subjects, who are your community, wherever you're filming, open up to folks, because I think like by being vulnerable, you get to share like yourself to the people who you want to film. And I think that opens themselves up as well. And it just makes, I think, filming much more meaningful and intentional if you're like vulnerable, with, and even within the edit as well. Like if you show a little bit of yourself, if you're the editor, if you show a little bit of yourself within the storytelling, I think it makes it much more rich and much more fun to watch.
Thank you all so much. I know we're nearing the end of our time, but during these COVID times, it's tough to see and hang out with you in person. Usually we have, a 4 or 5 day span where we're like going out for drinks afterwards and talking about our films and how we've made them and seeing how we can support each other. So my last question to each of you is, what's next on the horizon for you, and how can we, as your viewers and supporters, help you in the near future?
I think by being here at this virtual festival, I think that's like tons of support by watching our films. And I think encouraging folks to create their own films, I feel like is like a lot of support for me. Like if someone were to be like, oh, I saw your film and it made me want to try filmmaking, I think that would be so supportive of both me and of like everyone who wants to make films and has stories to be told. And personally for me, I'm also working on creating more work around Asian American identities in the South, and trying to like get that representation, as we talked about, of Southern identity out on the film, out in the world as well. So if folks could be on the lookout for that, and if they have stories to share, you can contact me.
Yeah, I was able to go to SAAFF last year, and that was probably like the most fun I've ever had at a film festival, because the community is so strong and so like tight knit that I had a great time. And then to be able to have my film in the festival this year is like such a pleasure and a joy. Yeah, I think just like it, like I do a lot of short films and I post them online a lot, and to just have like feedback, like criticism and feedback and what you thought of the film, I think that really helps like to improve my skill as a filmmaker. Like even lay people who aren't in film, just commenting on like a Facebook post of the video, or if you see it on Instagram, I think just any interaction is like really feels like my energy to like make more stuff, to generate new ideas, and just the interaction is like super strong to have that feel behind me to make the next film.
I think we'll have to do with like in YouTube, there's like a little section where like all of your Instagram handles show up. We'll have to find a way to get your information to everyone.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, I think definitely the virtual space has been both a gift because I think people respect boundaries more. And I, as a slightly introverted, extroverted person, I don't know. I think I'm introverted because I get all freaked out when people text me too much. Um, both want the interaction, right? But also appreciate like the boundaries of the pandemic putting and people understanding when you can't do stuff. But it in a way is very isolating, I think, for artists, right? Who sometimes when we go to festivals and we're just watching people watch our films, it feels so good. And then, but now it's in the virtual space, so we'll have no idea who's tuning in. So just by tuning in, I mean, I personally make work to be seen. I know some people make it for themselves, but for me, it really is about the kind of someone viewing it and it affecting them somehow, even if it's the effect is like anger or something, hopefully not too much anger. But and what Anthony said about feedback is like super helpful. I think especially now when we're not able to get that kind of feedback in person. And for me, I took a slight step away from filmmaking, or I felt like I did, but I guess I just made this film to sort of lean into things that I've been fearing to make. So I've been on the back burner for a very long time, been working on this experimental film with my mom. And I know it's like sounds so typical, you know, like you make a film about your mom, but it really was something that I wanted to do. And I've left it on the back burner for like now 4 years. I thought it was just going to be like a couple months. I'm like, oh, I can't look at this. Let me put it away. But I recently reopened it. And I think we'll just lean into the fear of like the ultra personal is what's on the horizon for me. And I hope that I can share that project someday soon and not in another 4 years or something.
Thank you so much to our audiences for joining the 9th Seattle Asian American Film Festival and watching this great Việt Kiều, Vietnamese American Shorts program. We greatly appreciate your support for the festival and our community. If you have not done so already, please take a moment to fill out our festival participant survey. There's a link in your confirmation email. Data from the surveys helps us get grants and sponsorships that make this festival possible. And it's another way that you can support SAAFF. And also check out our other programs on SeattleAAFF.org. Tickets are still available. On behalf of the Seattle Asian American Film Festival, thank you, stay safe, and stay healthy.